It would be very intelligent of you to set yourself the goal of really studying for this course. There can be no doubt of the wisdom of this decision for any student who wants to pass it. This is Alison Anton. You're listening to the ForgiveNest Podcast for A Course in Miracles, your place to explore ACIM topics in healing, meditation, and your special function in forgiveness. The passage I read to start us out is from Section 7 of Chapter 4 of the complete edition of A Course in Miracles. This whole section is pertinent to our topic today because Jesus discusses the proverbial "seek and ye shall find," and the number of diversionary tactics the ego uses to seek and not find. He indicates that to actually find what we seek requires us to notice the ways we bypass the help we need on this path, and then to hopefully choose a different approach so we can be helped. He goes on to say in this section, meaningful seeking is consciously undertaken, consciously organized, and consciously directed. The goal must be formulated clearly and kept in mind. And I want to focus on this for today's episode because A Course in Miracles is Jesus's course that he authored for us to consciously undertake so that our seeking is meaningful, that we actually find what we seek instead of seeking again and again and again and never finding. I realize everyone's at a different place with the course, but this episode is geared toward course readers who feel inside that they were called to A Course in Miracles as their path and want to go deeper. So I thought I'd emphasize today the fact that the course is a course. That should be clear from the title of A Course in Miracles, but for some very strange but not surprising reason, sometimes we unconsciously don't want to approach it as a real course of study. Not using it as a serious instruction manual could be yet another one of those ego tactics that intentionally diverts our mind away from the real goal of the book, which is to heal the split mind that wants to be separate from God. The ego identity that came from this split will inevitably try to take control of every seeking endeavor we set out on, because if we actually find what we're seeking, God, the ego knows it'll be laid aside. Its goal then is clearly to keep us from our goal and Jesus's goal for us. Why I picked this subject for an episode is because we're not yet in a place in our mindset where we're able to just snap our fingers and say, away with you, ego. You have no power over me, and then have it magically disappear. There's still a big part of our mind that wants the split. Because of this, we have an opposing will working against our true will. And that's super important to keep in mind if we really want to seek and indeed find, because the ego's always there working to divert our focus. We have to stay diligent. One way I see the ego working undercover in this way is by trying to make the course into more of a spiritual self-help book rather than a course study. We may want it to fit a certain kind of readability flow that we're so used to that reads easy cover to cover. And certainly the course is read cover to cover specifically, as we'll chat about in a bit, but it's a whole lot more of an undertaking than a typical book in the genre of spiritual self-help. It requires significant focus and commitment, even just to get through it once. The course is going to take time and study and pretty obviously practice. This isn't going to read like a typical book. Another diversionary pattern that readers of the course are prone to do that can subtly keep the ego in control of our course learning is, no surprise here, skipping around from section to section in the text. Has anyone not done this? We also love to open a page randomly in the workbook, kind of like we're picking a tarot card for the day. These are common and okay for a little bit, but at some point it starts to dawn on the reader that there's an actual sequence to the information. And once the reader really decides to meet the course in that way, she's not just reading the course anymore, she's now studying the course. The foundational reading and study material is the text, which is why the text is the first section of the 3-part course. Even the text chapters really are meant to be read consecutively because concepts are often referred to again and again later on in the text, and certainly again in the workbook too. These concepts and ideas sprout and grow leaves from the original seeds that were planted in earlier sections. They really flower if we have the conceptual framework for them to grow in. Otherwise, they potentially are just ideas that we might associate with similar subjects we've learned about in other spiritual or religious practices. There are many concepts that from the outside we assume are going to mean this or that based on our past experiences. But Jesus notoriously and sometimes surprisingly flips common concepts upside down in the course. So if we're jumping ahead or skipping around, it's very likely we'll make an incorrect connection, at least from the course perspective. Here's another quote from Jesus in this same section that underscores this. I have made every effort to use words which are almost impossible to distort, but human beings are very inventive when it comes to twisting symbols around. The ego will try to twist things around. Knowing this about the ego, it's a good idea to learn the course's foundational framework as early on as possible. The workbook, too, is also laid out in an order that's probably best to go through consecutively. These are the 365 daily lessons with structured practice periods throughout the day. The more we go through the workbook, the clearer it becomes that there's a groundwork laid in the earlier lessons to help us get to deeper levels as we reach the middle and later exercises. Coming to mind here is part 2 of the workbook that has a lot of focus on God. If you struggle or resist the concept of God, as we all do, or we wouldn't be here, it can be hard to make it through this section without the framework of a truly joyous and loving God, as the Course describes him, or without Jesus's guidance in understanding how deep our fear of God actually runs. There are preparatory concepts that are just good to understand before flipping. So while no one's going to stop you or punish you for flipping around, and I truly do believe Jesus will show up with you on whatever page you do land on, it just becomes clearer the more you proceed that the course ultimately is intended to be studied consecutively. So on that note, let's talk about timing. How long does it take to get through each section if you're reading it consecutively? Obviously, every individual is going to do it at the gait that works best under their own circumstances. And firstly, we need to ask what version of the course we're reading. I use the complete and annotated edition, which has 45,000 additional words than the Foundation of Inner Peace edition, otherwise known as the Blue Book. The complete edition, or the CE for short, also includes cameos, which are short essays, and one of my favorite things about the CE, footnotes that explain difficult passages, biblical references, and concepts that often refer back to previous sections. I personally read all of these. So with all these extra words, and if we take it slow and dedicated, reading one section or one cameo per day, it takes about 1.5 years to complete the text. This gives ample time to really digest the material and go deep. And for the workbook, it's another 1 year to complete, which is the same length in both the CE and the Blue Book. So we're looking at 2.5 years, give or take, to get through the first 2 sections of the course. Many students from there move through the manual for teachers or start again at the beginning to go through the text or workbook again, and sometimes yet again and again and again. For many of us on this path, it's really a lifetime of A Course in Miracles. We learn deeper as we go. And as we go deeper, our connection to Jesus and the Holy Spirit does strengthen. This is the personal aspect of A Course in Miracles that most course students eventually find, and that could have been what called us to the course in the first place even. Ultimately, we want and need this direct and personal communication, the sharing of information Jesus and the Holy Spirit give us. But that doesn't mean we should put the book on the shelf and just connect with them on the not-so-academic level as soon as we get stuck on a hard chapter or we start to resist the workbook exercises. This we could consider another one of those ego diversions. Getting stuck on course material is very common, but we need to train ourselves to come back to the page. There's still a lot of work we need to do yet to heal the split, and we need the interaction we get from coming back to the course proper. No one else is going to make us do this. It's a decision we have to make each day. If we know inside we've been called to A Course in Miracles as our path, I truly believe we need to stay the course, so to speak. We're not just called to Jesus, we're called to his course. And he's laid out what we need to do in the course. So everything we've talked about today is part of the learning. Diversionary tactics are expected because if we didn't each have them, we wouldn't need the course. But we do need to eventually recognize these ego diversions and resistances, and the ego's need to control our learning process. And the best way I know how to learn to recognize these patterns is to study and practice the course in the fashion the author intended us to go through it. I thought we'd end today with a section of a prayer that was originally intended as a prayer to God, but we can imagine saying it to Jesus in the context of helping us organize our practice and keeping us on track toward our unified goal. You can close your eyes if you want. So do we bring our practicing to you. And if we stumble, you will raise us up. If we forget the way, we count upon your sure remembering. We wander off, but you will not forget to call us back. Quicken our footsteps now, that we may walk more certainly and quickly unto you. And we accept the word you offer us to unify our practicing as we review the thoughts that you have given us. And I'll leave you with that to ponder. Thanks for listening to the ForgiveNest Podcast for A Course in Miracles. I'm Alison Anton. It was great talking to you.